Hey guys, welcome back to another episode on the Armstar YouTube channel. My name is Thomas, and today we're going to take a look at the FrSky X20 radio along with my basic Ethos DLG template that you can download and use. So for a quick recap, FrSky makes some really popular radio systems that are used in a lot of gliders. Thus far, their transmitters run OpenTX, which is a very flexible system. But because it is quite different than all the other systems out there, it does have a steep learning curve. So the X20 and the X20S are new radios from FrSky. They pioneered two new systems with FrSky. So firstly, they're equipped to run the new FrSky Tandem system, which basically it's a 2.4 gigahertz link as well as a 900 megahertz link for backup and or redundancy. And secondly, for better or for worse, these radios don't run OpenTX. So instead they run Ethos, which is their new in-house operating system. And the promise is to deliver the flexibility of OpenTX, but in a more user-friendly package. And from what I've seen so far, it mostly delivers on that. Now, keep in mind, Ethos is still technically under development, even though the X20 has been on sale now for a few months. So anything that might still be missing will likely be available in the not too distant future. What are your thoughts on OpenTX versus Ethos? Let us know in the comments below. Now, before we continue, if you enjoyed this video or find it useful, please remember to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe. It really does help our channel grow so that we can continue making these videos for you. So back to Ethos. So far, the biggest items that's lacking from what I've seen is Lua scripts are not yet supported, so we can't run F3K training apps on the X20 yet. But I've asked FrSky and they've told me that it is something that will be included in the future. From what I've seen, Ethos will likely be easier for someone who's been using other radio systems to learn and use. There are many prepackaged functions and mixes, just like what you'd find on a regular radio, to speed up the whole setup process, something totally lacking in OpenTX. And for those already familiar with OpenTX, you'd know that global variables are very useful for defining values for many functions, but you are limited to how many global variables you can have. Whereas in Ethos, there are no global variables and is somewhat replaced by VAR in mixes, although there are still some differences between the two. But the cool thing is you can pretty much set as many VARs as you'd ever need. So I've been playing with Ethos in my free time for the last little bit, and I've put together a basic DLG template that you can just load into your X20 or X20S. A big shout out to my friend in South China Soaring Association, my clubmate Vincent Su. I basically lifted his launch sequence from his program and put it into mine. So as you may know, I'm with the minority of pilots that pushes the flap stick up to activate the flaps for brakes. So I'm going to have two versions of the files for you guys. One is for those who push this up like I do, and the other is for those who prefer to pull down for flaps. So both files are going to be linked down below. Currently, there are two versions of the radio available, and I mentioned them a couple times. So they are the X20 and the X20S. And there's a couple small differences between the two, but the main one is going to be the gimbals. So the X20, which I have here, it comes with plastic Hall effect gimbals, which to be honest already feels really good. And for an extra $100, the X20S comes with CNC metal Hall effect gimbals, which will be even better in feel. Plus it does have more adjustments possible. So including the ability to rotate the entire gimbal up to 8 degrees, so then you can have it line up more in line with your thumb movement. So that would minimize cross control between the two axes of the gimbal. So the one I'm using right now is the X20, but that's mainly because I pressed the wrong button at checkout and I'm just a little bit too lazy to ship it back to my warehouse in California. So both radios are going to be available. You can get both radios through our US shop. It's armstorusa.com, and I'll add links to both radios below as well. So the X20 is going to be $349 and X20S is $449, and there's free shipping within the US. Okay, so let's walk through the basics of my template together. I'm not going to go into all the details and inner workings of how everything was done, as that's just going to turn into like a 2-hour video. But this video will give you all the information you need to use the template as is. And if you like, it should be relatively easy to modify some of my parameters to suit your preferences, and even adding functionalities that aren't included in my template. All right, so the first thing we're going to take a look at is going to be output. So going to model, output. You can touch the screen, you can use the scroll wheel. So my channel layout is going to be TAER. In this case, for DLG, there's no throttle. So it's going to be left aileron, right aileron for channel 2. Channel 3 is elevator, and channel 4 is going to be rudder. So you can go into these to set up your travel, max and min travel. and you can use that to set up your subtrim as well. So basically, when you first set up your model, you're going to come into output, you're going to go into each of the servo and make sure everything is centered, or in the case of the elevator and ailerons, you're going to have to offset that. Right, so next we're going to exit that. We're going to go into flight modes. So in flight mode, there's going to be launch, zoom, speed, cruise, thermal 1, and thermal 2. So basically for launch preset, right now I'm using the button on the back. So you hit the button and it's going to go into launch. You let go, it's going to go into zoom. And then you can push your elevator stick, either push or pull. And when you let go, it's going to leave zoom and go into your regular flight modes. So speed, middle is cruise, and it's going to go into thermal 1. And inside thermal, you can push this and go into thermal 2. It's going to say thermal mode because it doesn't have a voice package for thermal 2, but that's where you would do it. And those are the flight modes. So after flight modes, let's take a quick look at the curves. So just go back again and scroll all the way to curves. And there's only 4 curves right here, and actually only 2 of them are active. So the first one is going to be flap to elevator. And basically this is the elevator compensation when you're pulling your flaps, or in my case pushing the flaps, and the flaps come down, you're going to want to have some down elevator to compensate as well. So you would just long press that, come in, point configuration, and you would adjust the 5 points in here. The other curve I have in here is brakes, and this is not something you'll need to adjust. For example, in my case, for the push-up version of this template, there's a 5% deadband, and then as you push up, it's going to linearly go all the way to 100. And if you're looking at this on the pull-down version, it's just going to go the other way. So go out. You'll also notice a left aileron adjust and a right aileron adjust. So these are not fully set up yet. They're in there. They're going to be in a future version of this template. So next we're going to take a look at the mixer, and this is where a lot of the stuff happens. So scroll back, it's mixer right here. And first off, you're going to notice there's a lot of items here. So each of these is one set of commands, if you will. For the first ones, you're going to see it's a VAR aileron weight, VAR aileron differential, VAR elevator weight, elevator differential, rudder weight. All of these are VARs. And basically, these are individual weights that would be referenced as you're moving a control. So for an example, VAR aileron weight, let's long press that. So in here, in flight mode 0, which is launch, my aileron weight is 100%. In zoom, flight mode 1, zoom, 100%. Flight mode 2, which is speed, 100%. So in this case, my aileron weight for all my different flight modes are going to be 100%. If you wanted some of your aileron weight, for an example, let's say in speed mode, so let's go into speed, you can see it's FM2. Let's say you only wanted to have 80%. So you click that and you scroll that to 80%. And so only in flight mode 2 is your aileron weight going to be 80%. Okay, so let's bring that back to 100. So for aileron differential, same thing. In here, all of my flight modes have negative 80% differential. Now, this sounds like it's a lot of differential. This is just a numerical in the radio, right? It's not actually measuring what the differential value is on your control surface. And the reason there's going to be such a high negative number is because I offset my flaperon. So naturally, it's going to move up much less than it moves down, even after the offset. And so if I recall correctly, I think somewhere between negative 50, negative 60, something like that, is where the actual surface is about even. You're going to have to, find that figure on each of your own installs. But then anything after that is going to be the actual positive and negative differential. So I do have a little bit of negative differential for this particular model. Elevator weight, so VAR elevator weight, long press. I have 80% elevator weight on my launch preset and zoom. And for my rest of my modes, it's 100%. So this is where you would edit that as well. Elevator differential. This one you might not be familiar with. And this is because I do offset my elevator. If you look at some of my build logs, you'll notice I offset my elevator. So there's just enough up elevator to touch the boom, and the rest of the travel is going to be pushing down. So there's going to be a lot of pushover authority when you're at the top of the launch. So there's not going to be any differential for launch and for zoom. So at the top of the launch, at the apex, you're still going to have, as you're pushing over, you're still going to have a lot of downforce. And once you let go and return to 0, it's going to bring it to your regular flight modes. And then I'm going to have a negative 60% differential on the elevator. And so I'm going to have even up and down travel. So in regular flight, it's going to fly quote unquote normally, right? Next, it's rudder weight, self-explanatory. I'm not going to go in there. VAR camber. This is where I'm going to set the camber for each of my flight modes. So in cruise, it's 0% camber. In flight mode 1, negative 17%. And then there's 0 for speed, 4% for cruise, 9% for thermal 1, and 15% for thermal 2. So this is where you would adjust that. VAR snap flaps. So I don't have any snap flaps for any of my modes except for cruise and for thermal 1. And I have negative 4% on each of these. So as I pull my elevator stick, my flaperons are going to come down. And if I'm pushing my elevator stick, the flaperons are going to come up. And again, only in cruise and thermal 1. Now that's all the VARs that I have, although you can continue adding more. There's a plus sign over there. You can add a lot of different things. Let's just go in here. You can add a free mix, a VAR, you can add a trim, ailerons, elevator, rudder. So a lot of this is already pre-built for you. Okay, and that's one of the things about Ethos over OpenTX is there's a lot of pre-packaging. There's going to be more pre-packaging coming in the future, and that makes it a lot easier for someone brand new to FrSky or someone who's never touched OpenTX before. And if you're familiar with OpenTX, then this, you might spend an hour or 2 or 3, trying to find out exactly what goes where relative to OpenTX, but afterwards it's really quite simple. So the rest of these, let's see, this is Aileron, so let's long press this, and as you can see, for curve, that's where you're going to see expo, and I have 20% expo on my ailerons right now. This is the aileron mix, so this is what controls what happens to the aileron as I'm moving the stick, okay? For the weight, see this reference says VAR aileron weight, which we went through in the mixes a little bit earlier. You can add more different weights if you want. Differential, sorry, I jumped a bit over there. So for differential, again, that's references, VAR aileron differential. There's going to be 2 channel outputs. Output 1 is going to be left aileron, which is channel 1. Output 2 is going to be right aileron, channel 2. Okay. Elevator. Again, there's 35% expo on my elevator, and then it takes the weight from VAR elevator weight and the differential from VAR elevator differential. There's only 1 channel because I'm only using 1 servo, and that's going to be channel 3 elevator. Okay, so there's a couple more elevator mixes in here. So the first one is going to be elevator preset. So basically, instead of using my trim, going into launch mode and using my trim to keep trimming up until I get the level of up elevator I want for the launch preset for the rotation, I'm going to use this mixer, and basically the weight up value, as I push my launch preset, I'm going to have a negative 30% of up elevator, okay? And you can adjust this whatever way you want. So if you go more negative, that means you're going to have more up elevator. If you go, let's say you want less preset, then you would hit this, maybe bring it to negative 25%, right, or something like that. So for me, negative 30 seems to be a good weight. The next part is going to be the elevator slider. So I know very few people do this. On my right slider over here, when the bottom is to me, that means regular flying, okay? And I'm going to, after I get my model set up for the day, this is where I'm usually going to be flying at. But let's say I'm downwind and I really wanted to penetrate. Let's say I wanted to add like a click or 2 of down elevator. Instead of adding a click of 2 of down elevator, I use this to push it, and it's going to give 1%, actually, sorry, 2% of down elevator, and that just really pushes it forward. And I can, bring it to the middle, which is 1%, or turn it back off. And that's fully adjustable. And that basically just prevents me from having to, blip my elevator down by my hand, by myself, because I do tend to over control, and that's a really nice way to do it. And if you go in here, you can kind of adjust the value by yourself. And so the next one is global elevator trim. It's this pot right over here. It's set in the center. Basically, let's say you just went to the flying field. Sometimes you might need a couple clicks of elevator or a couple of points in your sub trim for everything to fly straight and level. So instead of having to go into your radio to do that, I just turn this knob. Either I move the elevator down a little bit or I move the elevator up a little bit, and I just leave it there. And this is a really nice and tight knob, so it's not going to, move by itself unless you want to, right? So that's my global elevator trim. And again, you can long press, go into here and adjust the values as you prefer. Rudder, self-explanatory, there's not much to it. So there's expo 20%, and then rudder weight is pulling the info from VAR rudder weight. There's no differential, and there's only one output going to channel 4. In terms of brakes, okay, my throttle stick goes for brakes. In this template that I'm using, push up for brakes. If you're using pull down in your template, it would be pulling down for brakes, and the curve would go the other direction. All right, so next on the list is going to be flap to elevator. This is the compensation. This is the curve we looked at earlier, and this mixer basically tells the radio what to do with that curve. So if you do need to adjust the compensation values, just go into the curve to do that. Next is aileron to rudder mix. Pretty self-explanatory. The weight is going to be from VAR aileron to rudder. So in this case, for this, in speed mode, it's 0%. Once you go into cruise, it's going to be 20, and the same thing for thermal. So that outputs into rudder. Next is the snap flap. You would adjust the values in the VAR snap flaps. Same thing as camber. So these are things that you don't really have to adjust. All right, so let's move back out, and I'll explain the rest of the switches. So the first one, the red one right here, that's going to be your volume. So you push up, higher volume, middle, low, okay? You already know this. This is going to be your flight modes. So you press this. I use this ring finger. I push it. It's going to be launch preset. I let go. And then if I push over at the top, it's not going to exit out of my zoom yet, right? So I'm going to push, and when I let go, then it's going to exit it. It can also be for pull, right? As long as it's over 10% of the travel between 0 to 4 seconds, then it's going to exit it. Then it's going to be speed, cruise, thermal, B, okay? For here, this has to do with your altimeter. So basically, if I want to know what my launch height is, I push it into the middle, and when I'm pushing the launch preset button, it's going to reset the altimeter. And as I go up, I push over and I let go, it's going to read out my altitude, or the max altitude of the launch. It doesn't say it just now because it's not connected to a model, so it doesn't have that info, but that's what it's for. And if you pull it all the way to yourself, that is going to be for your Vario on. So if you want to have Vario sound, if you're into that kind of thing, then that's how you would do it, okay? For this, it basically reads out your altitude at any given time. So if you're flying, you kind of just want to know your height, just flip that, you're going to know your height. On the back, this second button is going to read your time.
0.
And basically this time has to do with this right here. So let's talk about timer. So when this switch is all the way to the top, then none of the timers are active, okay? When you pull this timer to the middle, then I have a 45-second timer that starts counting down. This is what I use for my quick turnaround practice. When I press the button, it's going to reset. And when I let go, it's going to start counting down again. When I pull it all the way to myself, then this is not valid anymore, and I'm going to be using this, and this is the one I would use for just regular flying, so I know how long I'm flying for that flight. Again, if you press the button in the back for launch, it resets, and when you let go, it starts timing again. And this button on the right, if you press it,
6 seconds,
it is going to tell you the time that you've flown for that flight. So that's basically all the switches, and last but not least, just the regular trim buttons. So this controls my elevator trim, aileron trim, rudder trim. This doesn't really do anything because I don't have throttle on here. And that's it. All right, so hopefully you found the templates useful and that this video has given you a pretty clear idea on the functionalities of the template. So remember, if you do enjoy the video, please give it a like. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.